In the heart of the galactic dominion of Virelia floated the obsidian palace of Queen Lyra Voss, a being of iridescent scales and eyes that burned like twin stars. She ruled over 1,000 worlds with a cold grace that made even the bravest warriors tremble. Her court buzzed with intrigue, betrayal, and the ever-present hum of power. But lately something had begun to gnaw at her. Not fear, not doubt, but boredom. For centuries she had crushed rebellions, silenced dissent, and expanded her empire until its borders shimmered at the edge of known space, yet none of her generals, none of her advisors, none of her lovers had ever surprised her until him. He stood at the far end of the grand hall, clad in the dull gray uniform of a human guard. His name was Lisa Morgan, a name so plain it barely registered among the melodic titles of Virelian nobles. She had taken humans as servants after their world surrendered without a fight. They were soft, fragile creatures with no claws, no venom, no natural defenses, yet this one had been assigned to her personal guard detail after surviving an assassination attempt on her life. Not by fighting, but by throwing himself in front of a plasma bolt meant for her. At first she dismissed him as foolish a creature, acting on instinct, not strategy, but over the week she began to notice things the way he stood perfectly still for hours. Never fidgeting, never speaking, unless spoken to the quiet intensity in his eyes when he scanned the crowd for threats. The way he never bowed his head but met her gaze with a calm respect that bordered on defiance. One evening during a feast where Virelian lords boasted of conquests and feasted on living flame worms, Lyra called him forward. "You," she said, her voice like crushed glass. "Why do you serve?" Melissa did not kneel. He simply stood and answered, "Because someone has to." The court erupted in hisses, but Lyra raised a clawed hand. "Silence. You think yourself brave," she said, stepping closer, her tail curling behind. "Here I think myself necessary," he replied. She laughed. Then a sound rarely heard in the palace, and for the first time in decades she felt something stir inside her curiosity. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra found herself seeking his presence not as a guard but as a companion. She asked him about Earth, its oceans, its music, its strange concept of love. He spoke simply without embellishment, describing sunsets that painted the sky in colors. Virelians had never seen songs that made humans cry, for no reason, and the way people held hands just to feel less alone. "You are weak," she told him one night, as they stood on the observation deck, watching a nebula bloom in the distance. "Your kind surrenders too easily. You feel too much. You break too fast." "Maybe," she said softly, "but we also heal." She turned to him, then truly looked at him, not as a servant, not as a pet, but as something else entirely, something she could not name. Then came the rebellion by her own brother Cale Voss, who believed her rule had grown soft, that she had been corrupted by lesser species. He struck during the Eclipse Festival, when the palace shields were lowered for ritual. The explosion rocked the eastern wing fire and smoke filled the corridors. Virelian warriors turned on each other, blood slicked the marble floors. Lyra fought with the fury of a dying star, her claws rending armor, her voice commanding loyalty. But Kyle had planned well. He had poisoned the royal guard, turned them against her, and now he stood before her in the throne room, his blade raised. "You have grown weak, sister." He sneered. "Surrounded by traitors, you let a human stand beside you like an equal." Before he could strike, a figure lunged from the shadows. It was Lisa Morgan, battered, bleeding, but moving with a speed that defied his human frame. He tackled Cale. Knocking the blade from his hand, the two crashed to the floor, rolling in a tangle of limbs and fury. Lyra watched stunned as the fragile human fought a Virelian warlord twice. His size, he had no weapons, no armor, no enhancements yet. He moved with a desperation that bordered on genius, using the environment, the shadows, the very air to his advantage. He slammed Cale into pillars, tripped him with torn banners, and finally pinned him with a broken spear. "Hold still." Cale snarled, struggling. "You are nothing. I am the guard she chose," Lisa said through gritted teeth. "And that makes me everything." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes blazing. She placed a hand on Lisa's shoulder, then turned to the traitors who still stood frozen in shock. "Anyone who draws breath against me," now she said, "will lose it forever." The remaining rebels dropped their weapons. In the aftermath, the palace was rebuilt, the traitors executed, and Lyra's rule solidified. But something had changed. She no longer sat alone on her obsidian throne. Instead, she had a chair placed beside it, not equal in height, but close enough to matter. "You called me weak," she said to Lisa one evening as they watched the stars from the garden he had helped plant with earth flowers that glowed faintly in the dark. "I called you human," he corrected gently. She smiled a rare, true smile, and for the first time, she did not feel like a queen. She felt like herself. News of the human guard spread across the galaxy, tales of how a soft, fragile creature had saved the Iron Queen. Some called it a myth, others a warning. But on Varelia, the truth was known and respectedly. Ravos, the most feared ruler in the galaxy, now walked, with a human at her side, not as a pet, not as a servant, but as her hero. And though he never asked for reward or title, Lisa Morgan had earned something far greater: the unwavering trust of a being who once believed no one could surprise her. In the quiet moments between wars and treaties, they would sit together watching the twin moons rise over the capital city, and she would ask him about Earth again, and he would tell her stories of rain and laughter, and people who believed in second chances. "You still think we are weak?" she asked once. He looked at her, not with pity, not with fear, but with something she had only read about in ancient human texts. "Affection, no," he said. "We are just different, and sometimes different is enough." She leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that would have shocked her court into silence. But here in the garden, under alien stars, it felt right. The galaxy kept turning, empires rose and fell. But in the heart of Varelia, something new had taken root. Not conquest, not fear, but understanding. And it all began with a human who stood when others ran, who spoke when others bowed, and who proved that strength was not always in claws or fire, but sometimes in the quiet courage to care. Ra never called him weak again. Instead, she called him by his name, Lisa, and in the language of Varelia. That word now meant protector. Months passed since the rebellion, and peace settled over Varelia. Like a soft but watchful blanket, Queen Lyra ruled with the same iron will. But her eyes held a new light, a quiet warmth that confused her advisors and unsettled old enemies. She no longer dined alone nor walked the palace halls in silence. Lisa Morgan remained at her side, not as a guard by title, but as something deeper, a confidant, a presence that grounded her in ways she could not explain. The court whispered, of course they always did. Some said the human had cast a spell. Others claimed Lyra had lost her edge, but none dared speak openly. Not after what happened to Kale. His name was scrubbed from records, his image erased from every wall, his very existence denied as if he had never been born. One morning, Lyra summoned Lisa to the royal archives, a vast chamber filled with floating crystals that held the history of 1,000 species. She stood before a glowing orb showing Earth as it once was, green, blue, and alive. "I have been reading about your world," she said. "Humans build cities, then tear them down. They fight wars, then sing songs of peace. They break hearts, then mend them with words. How is this not chaos?" Lisa stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back. "As always, calm, steady." He said, "Chaos is part of living. Your people plan every breath, every word, every move. You call it order. I call it fear." She turned to him, scales shimmering in the soft light. Fury's fear of being wrong, fear of feeling too much, fear of losing control. She was silent for a long time. Then she reached out and touched his wrist, not with claws, but with the flat of her palm, a gesture of trust among Varelians. "You speak as if you know us better than we know ourselves." "I only know you," she said, "and that is enough." Outside the palace, tensions stirred on the outer rim. Colonies' unrest grew, fueled by rumors that the queen had grown soft, that she favored humans over her own kind. A new faction called the Pure Scale rose in secret, their symbol a broken chain and a burning earth. Lyra learned of them through intercepted messages. But she did not act. Not yet. She wanted to see how deep the rot went. Meanwhile, Lisa began training a new unit. Not Varelian warriors, but humans rescued from labor camps scattered across the Dominion. They were thin, scared, and broken, but under Lisa's guidance they stood taller. They learned to fight, not with rage but with discipline, with unity. He taught them that strength was not in how hard you hit, but in how well you protect. Queen Lyra watched one training session from a high balcony hidden in shadow. She saw Lisa correct a young woman's stance, not with anger but with patience. She saw him share his rations when supplies ran low. She saw him stay late to listen to a boy who missed his home. That night she asked him why he did it, because someone has to. He said again the same words he used when they first met, but this time she understood they were not words of duty. They were words of hope. Then the attack came. Not on the palace but on the human settlement just outside the capital. The pure scale struck at dawn using stolen Varelian tech. They burned homes, shattered shields, and took hostages, including a young girl named Maya, who had once given Lisa a flower made of wire. Lyra wanted to send the royal fleet to crush them, but Lisa stopped her. They do not want war. He said, they want you to prove them right, that you care more about power than people. Let me go alone. You would walk into their den unarmed. Not unarmed, he said. I will take truth against her better judgment. Lyra agreed. Lisa went to the rebel camp alone, wearing only his gray uniform. No weapons, no armor, just his voice and his will. The pure scale leader. A scarred Varelian named Vor laughed when he saw him, the queen's pet. He sneered. Come to beg for your pets back. I came to talk, Lisa said. Talk, Vor spat. We do not talk to soft things. Then listen, he said. And for the first time in his life, Lisa raised his voice, not in anger but in clarity. You think humans are weak because we do not kill for honor, because we cry when we lose, because we forgive. But your way has only brought you pain. Your brother Kale tried to rule through fear and he fell. Your ancestors conquered 1,000 worlds, but none of them truly loved you. Vor stepped forward, blade drawn, but Lisa did not flinch. If you kill me, the queen will burn your world to ash. But if you let the hostages go, she will hear your grievances. She will listen because I taught her how. Silence fell over the camp, then from the back a voice spoke. It was Maya, the little girl. She stepped forward holding the wire flower. He gave me this when I was sad, she said to Vor. He said it would last longer than real ones because it was made with care. Vor looked at the child, then at Lisa, then at his own people. Their eyes no longer filled with hate but with doubt. Lowly he lowered his blade. The hostages were freed. The pure scale disbanded not by force but by choice. Some joined the human unit. Others returned to their homes changed. When Lisa returned to the palace, Lyra was waiting not on her throne but at the gate. You risked everything, she said. I believed in you. He replied, and in that moment she understood the true power of humans. It was not in their weapons or their ships but in their belief in others. Days later, Lyra announced a new decree. Humans would no longer be servants. They would be citizens with rights, representation, and protection. The court gasped, but no one objected. Not after what they had seen. Lisa stood beside her as she spoke to the gathered crowd. His presence a quiet symbol of what was possible. That evening, as the twin moons rose, Lyra asked him if he would stay. Where else would I go? He said. She took his hand in hers, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. You once called me weak, she said, and you called me fragile. He smiled. Now we are neither. No, she said. Now we are strong together, and in the heart of the galaxy where empires rose and fell on blood and fire, something rare and fragile began to grow. Not a weapon, not a throne, but trust built not by claws or conquest but by a human who dared to care, and a queen who learned to listen. The stars watched in silence as two different beings found common ground, not in war but in understanding. And for the first time in centuries, Varelia did not feel like a dominion. It felt like a home. Peace did not last long in the galaxy, and Lyra knew it better than anyone. The dominion had grown too large too fast, and old enemies never truly vanished. They only waited in the dark for a moment of weakness. Rumors reached the palace of a hidden fleet gathering beyond the ash veil, a region of space littered with dead stars and broken ships. The fleet flew no flag, but its ships bore the mark of the old coalition, the alliance that had fallen centuries ago trying to stop Varelia's rise. Lyra called her war council. But this time she did not sit alone at the head of the table. She placed Lisa beside her, not as an advisor by rank but by choice. The Varelian generals bristled but none spoke against it, not after the pure scale incident, not after seeing how humans now stood shoulder to shoulder with Varelian guards in the palace halls. The enemy's plan was simple: They would strike at the heart of the Dominion, not the capital but the Unity Hub, a massive station where humans, Varelians, and dozens of other species traded shared knowledge and lived together. It was the symbol of Lyra's new vision, and destroying it would shatter the fragile trust she had built. We must reinforce the hub. Lyra said, her voice sharp as glass. The generals agreed. But Lisa remained silent. Speak, she said, turning to him. If we send warships, they will see it as a threat. He said the hub was built on peace, not defense. If we arm it, we betray its purpose. Then what do you suggest we let them burn it? No, he said. We invite them. The room fell still. You cannot be serious. A general hissed. Listen, Lisa said calmly. The coalition wants to prove that your new way is weak, that mixing species makes you vulnerable, so prove them wrong. Let them come to the hub. Let them see humans and Varelians working side by side, eating together, raising children together. Let them see that unity is not weakness, it is strength they cannot break. Lyra studied him, her eyes unreadable, then she nodded. Prepare the invitation, she ordered. The message was sent across the void, simple and open. The Unity Hub welcomes all, even those who once called us enemy. Weeks passed in tense silence. Then one morning a single ship appeared on the edge of hub space. No weapons charged, no shields raised, just a slow approach. The coalition had come. Lyra and Lisa stood on the observation deck of the hub, watching through the clear dome below them. Humans and Varelians moved together, repairing systems, tending gardens, teaching children in shared classrooms. No one panicked. No one fled. They are watching, she said. And we are showing, he replied. The coalition delegates stepped onto the hub deck, led by an old Varelian named Sarah, who had fought Lyra's mother in the last great war. Her scales were dull, her eyes heavy with years, but her posture was proud. You have changed, Lyra, she said, not as an insult but as a fact. The galaxy changes, Sarah. Lyra answered. So must we. Sarah looked around at the mingling species, at the laughter echoing in the corridors, at a human child handing a Varelian elder a cup of warm tea. This is not the Empire. I knew it is not an empire anymore, Lyra said. It is a home. Lisa stepped forward, then not with authority but with humility. My people once feared yours. He said, we thought you were monsters, but you are not. You are just different like us, and difference does not have to mean war. Sarah studied him for a long time. Then she did something no one expected. She bowed, not deeply, but enough to show respect. Perhaps we were all wrong, she said. The coalition stayed for 3 days. They walked the hub. They spoke. With workers they ate simple meals and listened to stories. They saw no soldiers, no spies, no traps, only people trying to live. When they left, they took more than data. They took hope back on Varelia. Lyra stood with Lisa on the palace balcony. The stars stretched endlessly before them. You changed everything. He said softly. No, she said, you showed me how. But peace always has a price. Weeks later, a distress signal came from the outer rim. A human colony under attack, not by rebels but by raiders, from beyond known space creatures of shadow and hunger who fed on fear and left only husks behind. Ra prepared the fleet, but Lisa stopped her again. This is not like the coalition, he said. These are not beings who can be reasoned with. They do not want land or power, they want to consume. Then we destroy them. Not with ships, he said. They move through dark space. They avoid direct conflict. They strike and vanish. We need to draw them out. How by offering bait? You cannot mean do, he said. Send Lyra's. Eyes flared red with anger and fear. No, Lyra, please, he said. If they sense a strong mind, they will come. They feed on strong emotions. Fear, rage, hope. If I go alone, they will follow me to a place of our choosing. She wanted to refuse to lock him away, to keep him safe. But she saw the truth in his eyes. This was not recklessness, it was sacrifice. Where she asked, the dead zone, a graveyard of ships beyond the ash veil. No signals, no escape. Perfect. She agreed. But only if she came with him. You're the queen and you are my protector, she said simply. So they went together in a small stealth vessel. No markings, no weapons, just two beings flying into the dark. The raiders came as expected, drawn by Lisa's steady mind and Lyra's burning will. They emerged from folds in space like living smoke, their forms shifting never solidly. Ra fought with fire and fury, but they slipped through her attacks. Lisa did not fight. He stood in the center of the ship, calm, open. He let them in. Not his body, but his mind. He showed them Earth's pain, its wars, its losses, but also its sunrises, its music, its quiet acts of kindness. The raiders hesitated. They had never felt hope before. In that moment of confusion, Lyra activated the ship's core, overloading it not to destroy them but to blind them with pure light. Varelian light forged from star cores and ancient will. The raiders shrieked and fled back into the void. The ship drifted, damaged but alively. Ra pulled Lisa close. His face pale, his breath shallow. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "Because someone has to show the dark that light exists." She held him until his breathing steadied. When they returned, the galaxy was different. The raiders did not return. The outer colonies slept safer. The Unity hub grew larger. More species joined. Or made another decree: the Dominion would no longer expand through conquest but through invitation. And Lisa Morgan, though still wearing his simple gray uniform, became something more than a guard, more than a hero. He became a bridge. An evening, as they sat in the garden, Maya, the little girl, now older, ran up holding 2 wire flowers, one for each of them, for the Queen and her human. She said with a grin. Lyra took hers and looked at Lisa. "You once stood in front of a plasma bolt for me. And you stood in the dark with me," she said. "We are even." "No," he said, smiling, "we are together." And in that simple truth, the future of 1,000 worlds found its foundation not in power, not in fear, but in 2 different beings who chose to trust. The stars above did not care for empires or wars. They only watched as life found a way. And for the first time in a long time, the galaxy felt not vast and cold, but small and warm, like a home shared by all years past. And the unity of Virelia grew stronger, not through laws alone, but through daily acts of trust. A Virelian child learning human songs in school. A human engineer helping design faster ships using Virelian crystal tech markets where spices from a dozen worlds mixed in the air, and laughter needed no translation. Queen Lyra no longer ruled from fear but from presence. She walked among her people, not hidden behind guards but beside them. And always near her was Lisa Morgan. Not in uniform anymore, but in simple clothes of his own choosing. Still quiet, still watchful, but now with a smile that came easier. Yet peace is never final. A signal came from deep space, not a distress call, not a threat, but a memory. It was an old human frequency. A looped message from the early days of Earth's space program, lost for centuries and somehow, now repeating near the edge of known space. The words were faint but clear. "This is Earth Vessel Odyssey. We are alone. But we hope someone hears." Lear knew what this meant. Earth had sent colony ships before its surrender. Many vanished into the void, assumed destroyed. But one had survived, and now it was calling home. Lisa stood silent when he heard the message, his hands trembling for the first time in years. "You must go," she said. "It is not my place. I am not from that ship. But you are human," she said, "and they are calling for hope. Not for a ruler, not for a warrior, just for someone who remembers what Earthwash." Looked at her eyes full of fear, not of danger, but of loss. "What if they do not recognize me? What if I do not recognize them? Then you will remind them who they are," she said, "and who they can be." So they prepared a ship, not a war vessel, but a messenger craft, small, fast, and open. The journey would take weeks through uncharted lanes, and Lyra insisted on going with him again. "You cannot leave the throne unattended," he argued. "The throne is not a cage," she said. "It is a promise, and I keep my promises to you." They flew together through silent space, passing nebulae that glowed like dreams and asteroid fields that sang in the ship's sensors. The message grew stronger, clearer, until they found it, a lone ship drifting near a blue-white star. Its hull scarred by time, but its light still on. They docked carefully. No weapons, no shields, just an open channel. A voice answered, rough with age but human. "Identify yourself." "This is Lisa Morgan of Earth," he said, "and Queen Lyra of Virelia. We heard your call." Silence, then the airlock opened. Inside the Odyssey was a world frozen in time, books on shelves, real paper, food grown in hydroponic, gardens, and people with eyes wide with wonder and fear. They had heard stories of Virelia, the great dominion that swallowed Earth whole. They expected chains, not kindness. But Lisa walked among them. Not as a conqueror, but as a brother. He spoke of Rain of cities, of music, of loss and rebuilding. And they wept because they had forgotten they were not alone. Their leader was a woman named Claire, older than Lisa, with silver in her hair and fire in her voice. She had been a child when the Odyssey left Earth. She had never seen a Varelian before. "Is it true," she asked Lyra, "that you rule over humans? I rule with them?" Lyra said, "Not over." Claire looked at Lisa. "And you stand with her by choice, and by heart." That night the Odyssey held a feast, not of flame worms or alien delicacies, but of earth food, bread soup. Apples grown from seeds carried for generations. They ate under soft lights and shared stories. Lyra listened more than she spoke. She heard of Earth's last days not as a defeat, but as a choice to survive, not through war but through escape, through hope. "You are not what we feared," Claire said to her, "and you are not what I expected." Lyra replied, "In the days that followed, the two ships exchanged more than supplies they exchanged. Trust." Claire agreed to bring the Odyssey into the Unity, not as subjects but as partners, a new voice in the council, a new story in the archives. But before they left, something unexpected happened. A young boy from the Odyssey approached Lisa, holding a small music box. "My grandmother said, 'This plays the last song from Earth,' he said. 'Will you listen with?' Melissa knelt and nodded. The tune was soft, sad, and beautifully. Ro watched him, tears in her star-bright eyes. She had never seen him cry before. When the song ended, the boy asked, 'Is Earth gone?' Lisa looked at Lyra, then back at the boy. "Parts of it are, but Earth is not just a place, it is a feeling. It is kindness in hard times. It is hope when there is none. It is people like you remembering and sharing." Boy smiled and handed him the music box. "Keep it," he said. "So you never forget on the journey back." Lisa held the box close. "You are still human." She said, "I am still me," he said. And that is enough. When they returned, the news spread fast. The lost colony found. The circle of unity widened. More ships reached out, more voices joined the chorus. Lyra stood before the Grand Assembly, not on a throne but on the same floor as everyone else. Humans, Varelians, and others side by side. "We were once alone," she said, "each of us in our own worlds, thinking we were the only light in the dark. But we were wrong. Light multiplies when shared." Lisa stood at the edge of the room, not in front, not behind, just present. That night in the garden, Maya, now a young woman, brought them tea and sat with them. "Do you ever miss Earth, Lisa?" she asked. "Every day," she said, "but I carry it here." She touched her chest, "And I see it in you." "In all of you?" Lyra took his hand. "You gave them back their past, and you gave them a future." He said, "The stars above shone brighter than ever, not because they changed, but because those below finally learned to look up together. No more empires, no more conquests, only connection." And in the quiet hum of the palace, the music box played softly a lullaby for a galaxy learning to hell. The galaxy had grown quieter, not from fear but from understanding. Trade routes hummed with shared knowledge, not weapons. Schools taught children in many tongues. And the Unity Council met not to issue commands, but to listen. The change had not come overnight nor without cost, but it held because it was built on something real. Trust, and at the heart of it all stood two figures who never sought glory, only each other's presence. Lyra no longer wore the heavy crown of dominion. She kept it in a glass case in the Palace Museum, a relic of a harder time. Now she walked the halls in simple robes, her scales catching the light like morning dew. Lisa stayed close, not as a guard, but as a friend, though the people still called him the Silent Shield, a title he never asked for but never refused either. One day a young Varelian student named Nia came to the palace, not with a petition, but with a question. She had read the old records, how a human once stood before a plasma bolt for the queen, how he faced rebels and raiders and never raised a weapon in anger. Why, she asked Lisa in the garden where earth flowers still bloomed. Why did you do it? He looked at the sky, then at her eyes wide with curiosity, because someone had to show that strength is not about winning but about caring. Nia frowned, but caring does not stop a blade, he said. But it stops the hand from throwing. Lyra heard this from the balcony above and smiled. She remembered the first time. She called him weak now. She knew there was no greater strength than the courage to be kind in a cruel universe. But peace, like all living things, needs Korea. New signal came not from lost ships or old enemies, but from the deep void beyond the known arms of the galaxy. It was not a message, but a pattern, a repeating sequence of light and silence that matched no known language. Yet it felt alive. Scientists across the Unity studied it for weeks until a human linguist named Elena noticed something. The pattern mirrored the rhythm of a human heartbeat combined with the pulse of Varelian star crystals. "It is not a message," she said, "it is a greeting." Lyra gathered her closest advisors, including Lisa and Elena. They met not in the war room, but in the observatory where the stars felt close enough to touch. "Someone out there knows us," she said, "or knows what we have become." Lisa added. The council debated for days. Some urged caution, others curiosity. But Lyra made her choice. "We answer not with ships, not with weapons, but with truth," so they built a beacon. Not of metal, but of memory. It broadcast images of Earth sunsets, Virelian nebulae children playing together songs from 100 worlds, and at its center the sound of a single heartbeat human. And Virelian recorded side by side. They sent it into the void and waited. Weeks passed, then months. The signal from the deep void changed. It grew stronger, clearer, and then one day it stopped. Fear spread through the Unity. Had they angered something? Ancient had they invited destruction? But Lisa remained calm. "They are coming to see for themselves," he said. And he was right. A ship appeared on the edge of sensor range. Unlike any design, it was smooth, organic, almost alive. Its surface shimmering like water under moonlight. It made no aggressive moves, it simply waited. Lyra and Lisa took a small shuttle to meet it alone, as they had done before. As they drew closer, the alien ship opened a bay, not with force, but with grace. Inside stood beings tall, slender, with skin like polished stone and eyes that held galaxies within them. They did not speak, but images filled the minds of Lyra and Lisa. Not words, but feelings. "Welcome, curiosity, peace." The leader stepped forward and placed a hand on its chest, then pointed to Lisa and Lyra. "You are the first," she thought, the words forming in their minds without sound. "The first who chose unity over conquest, the first who healed instead of broke." Lyra bowed her head slightly, a rare gesture. "We learned it was better." The beings shared their story. They were the keepers of the old silence watchers who had seen empires rise and fall across eons. They had sent the signal to test if any species had broken the cycle of violence. You passed not by power, but by patience before they left. They gifted the Unity a seed not of plant or metal, but of light. It would grow only where trust lived, and its glow would guide lost souls, home back on Virelia. The seed was planted in the center of the Unity hub within days. It sprouted into a tree of soft light, its branches humming with warmth. Children gathered under it, elders rested in its shade, and even the most hardened warriors felt calm near it. Lyra stood with Lisa beneath its glow one evening. "Do you think they will return?" "Someday," she said, "but they do not need to. We have what they gave us, proof that we are not alone in wanting peace." Maya. Now a teacher brought her students to see the tree every week. She told them the story of the human who stood in front of fire and the queen who learned to listen. "You think they believe it?" Lisa asked, watching the children touch the light. "They believe in us," she said. And that is how stories live. Years flowed. Like rivers, Lyra's rule became legend, not for battles won, but for bridges built. Lisa never took a title, never sought power yet. His name was spoken with reverence across 1,000 worlds. One morning he did not wake. He was old by human years, though. Young by Virelian standards, his body had carried him through fire and void, and finally, it asked for rest. Lyra held his hand as the light left his eyes. She did not weep, not then, but she sat with him for a full cycle of the twin moons. When she rose, she carried the wire flower Maya had given them long ago and placed it on his chest. The funeral was not grand, but deep. Every species of the Unity sent a token, a song, a stone, a memory they gathered not in a hall but under the light tree and shared. Stories not of war but of kindness. Afterward, Lyra walked alone to the garden where it all began. She sat on the bench they had shared for so long. "You called me weak," she whispered to the wind, "and you called me fragile." Came a memory, not a voice, but a feeling. Now we are neither. Now we are together. And though Lisa was gone, his presence remained in every human who stood tall in Varelian halls, in every Varelian who shared a meal with a stranger, in every child who believed that different did not mean dangerously, were ruled for many more years, her heart never full but never empty either. And when her time came, she asked to be laid beneath the light tree beside him. The galaxy kept turning, but the story did not end. It lived in the quiet courage to care, in the choice to listen, in the simple act of standing beside someone when the world burns. And somewhere in the stars a new signal began to pulse, soft, steady, and full of hope.